All right, well, welcome to our last session of the day. Our next speaker is somebody that I'm sure nobody here knows who he is. Ethan Galstad. He is the founder of Nagios and the president of Nagios Enterprises. Also happens to be my boss, and I have the privilege for working for him. He's probably the best boss I've ever had, and he paid me to say that. So, yeah. Well, let's give Ethan a hand, everybody.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mike. I didn't actually pay him to say that. He's actually, probably our best guy on our team, but thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to, I mentioned Nagios XI briefly in the keynote this morning. It's our commercial product, and I've got a few slides. I'll try to go through the slides pretty quickly. The slides were meant as a backup in case my VMs totally failed or I couldn't get internet access, a demo. A lot of things can go wrong in a demo. I have told our team plenty of times it's not a good demo unless something goes wrong, because half the time when I'm giving them a demo, something goes wrong. So hopefully nothing will go wrong, or we'll minimize what does go wrong, I guess. Nagios XI, it's our commercial product. It's built on top of Nagios Core and other open source components, like PNP is the graphing engine we use. We use Nagios QL as the advanced configuration backend. We've actually modified it. We're moving towards Nagios CCM, which is basically a rewrite of a lot of what's in Nagios QL right now. But it's built on a lot of the best tools that were out there that we found were used by the community most widely. When we started the company in 2007, we primarily did consulting, and it seemed that everybody that we did consulting for wanted the same things. They wanted integrated performance graphing, a database backend, and a bunch of other stuff. And we did a lot of those jobs, and they had a lot of similarities. And after a while, we just said, we need to package something together that's a product that fits the needs of 90% of the people who contact us, because it doesn't make sense to do a one-off implementation all the time. It's really time-intensive if you've ever done consulting. So that's kind of how Nagios XI got started. The first release was, December of '09. I think we promised everybody it would be out by the end of the year. So New Year's Eve night was uploading the first release. We really got it in the nick of time, but so it's been out for almost 2 years. We put a lot of thought into how it was designed so that it would have maximum flexibility, just like Nagios Core does. It provides you a lot of flexibility in that you can design plugins for it, add-ons for it. We wanted the same type of flexibility in the architecture for Nagios XI. And there are a number of different APIs that we built into Nagios XI that you can grab data from the back end, integrate it with your own front end. Like if you have a public portal, you want to display some status information, it's very easy to do. We have what are called configuration wizards, and I'll take you through those. But we've added done a lot of work into the underlying stuff that you don't really see. There's also been a lot of work done on the UI to actually integrate a lot of these components. If you have used Nagios Core with a lot of the common add-ons, you know that you can do it. And once you know how to do it, it's not that hard to do. It's just it's not easy to get a unified look. And oftentimes, end users who are not Linux, Unix super admins, and managers also want something that looks good. And so that we spent a lot of time on Nagios XI making sure that we, made it look integrated. I'm going to go briefly over some of the features, and then I'll start with the demo. One of the biggest things we added in Nagios XI was dashboards, and I'll demonstrate those. Integrated performance graphing. We did a lot of work to make sure that each user who logged in got to customize their own preferences. One example of that is if I log in, I can personally customize when I get notification messages or what those messages look like. And if you're running Nagios Core, it's not easy to do. You have to go back to the Nagios admin and say, could you change my notification times or change the format of the messages that I get? I want messages that look different than you. And we've tried to put a lot of the power to customize the way Nagios XI works, feels, and how it operates in the hands of the actual end users who might be using it. Configuration wizards, I mentioned, are a really easy way to get up and running and monitoring something very easily. You don't need to be a super network admin to understand what it's, how to set something up. We have, as I mentioned, the Nagios CCM, Nagios QL, advanced config GUI, added things like auto discovery visualizations and some reporting stuff. There's a ton of stuff, and we never have time. We do a lot of WebEx demos for clients or people that are looking at XI, and we can never get through a portion of what XI has to offer in an hour. So I'm not going to try to hit on everything, but I'll just touch on some of the highlights. For the dashboards, the customized dashboards are available to each user. They can customize them with dashlets that get updated, automatically with Ajax, and they can have unlimited dashboards, and they're distinct per user. As an admin, you can create dashboards and deploy them to other users. So if you're, you have a dashboard that you think would be really cool or interesting for management, you can create that dashboard and then deploy it to one or more other user accounts in Nagios XI. You can also keep that dashboard synchronized so the managers can't change it or delete it. So some kind of cool stuff you can do. Built-in graphs, we use PNP. It's one of the big graphing applications out there. Nagios Graph is another one. You heard from Matt Wall earlier. He's one of the guys behind Nagios Graph. But we chose PNP initially. Seems to work pretty well. We might switch actually to Nagios Graph. We were thinking about that in the future. I already mentioned the per-user customization. Notification preferences, dashboards, views. These are all per user. Configuration has been made a lot easier in Nagios XI. If you are currently using Nagios Core, you know what the screen is. It's what you have to do to edit essentially your config files right now. You launch Emacs, VI, Nano. Maybe you use one of the configuration front ends for Nagios, but you have to know the syntax and of the Nagios config files, and you have to know what things like use and register mean. And that's not, normal IT people shouldn't have to learn this stuff, and non-IT people should never have to see anything like this. What we did in Nagios XI is made what are called configuration wizards, and this is something where the end users can say, I want to monitor a website or a Windows server, or a Linux server, or a DNS server, and they can just choose from a list. And when they choose the proper wizard, it asks them simple questions like, okay, you want to monitor a website, what's the URL? And they enter the URL, and it gives them a few options. They click apply, and Nagios starts monitoring that. They never need to understand what the check HTTP plugin is or the syntax. It's an easy way to I guess get things done. Screenshot of one of them here. This is the printer monitoring wizard. I'll take you through a wizard live so you can see what it is. But it's just, these are meant to just ask very simple questions that people can understand very easily. The advanced configuration GUI is the Nagios CCM. It's based on Nagios QL. We're rewriting the front end based on feedback we've gotten from our customers and some features that they want. Auto discovery was a new feature that we actually added, in the past 9 months or so. Underneath the hood, it runs Nmap and fping, and these utilities are available for Nagios Core. You can find them on Nagios Exchange. They're not end-user friendly at all, and that's why we wrote a config or GUI on top of them to make them easy to use, easy to understand, and actually easy to take the auto discovery job results and import them or apply them to your monitoring configuration. And one thing that's pretty cool is you can create set up monitoring for a server like a website or your Windows server, your firewall, and get it just right. And then you can say, I've got 100 of those. And they're all exactly the same, except each one has a different IP address. And what you can do is use our bulk import wizard to basically clone one of the machines that you've already defined in Nagios XI and replicate that over all 100. It's a pretty nice little feature. We've added some visualizations. Nagios Core and Nagios XI both have kind of the standard logging and reports that are available. They're really practical, they're extremely boring, and nobody likes looking through the logs. They're useful, and you need to look through logs when you diagnose a problem or you want to figure out what happened, but they're really boring to look at. And they're not always easy to interpret. So what we decided is to change the way that data was represented to make it easier to understand. One of these is called the alert stream, and I'll show you what this looks like in real life. I'll show you an example. But it's a different way to visualize the types of alerts or the number of alerts that have come in over time. And when you look at a graph like this, it's easy for your mind and your eye to spot patterns and to pick out problem makers. And that's what we try to do in Nagios XI, change the way that you can understand the data, make it more readable, more interesting. This is our heat map. It's another type of visualization, allows you to spot patterns. I mean, you can look at a log file and see, okay, this website went down, here and here and here, and yeah. But when you graph it on a heat map like this, you can immediately spot that there are patterns. And if you know that the horizontal axis is time and the vertical axis is hosts and services, you can immediately pick out that there are a couple, two hosts that are causing problems almost consistently. So it's a really nice way to just visualize what's happening on your network. Our network replay, I'll show you that in real time. Actually, it's much, it's not really, the replay allows you to basically see in real time or going back in time and see how the network changed. See how hosts went up or down, or how the network status changed over time. And some flashy stuff that I'll show you later. We redesigned the reports to make them easier to understand. We took out some data that was maybe a little bit too advanced for most people. The Nagios core reports are still available under the hood, but the new XI ones were kind of toned down a little bit, and we try to make them easier to understand for everyone. We also added data export like CSV and PDF to make it really easy. A lot of people wanted and needed PDF reports for management or for some kind of incident response thing, so that's in there now. Each user can add their own favorite reports, so somebody can say, look, I want to easily be able to always run an availability report for this group of servers, and I always want that report to be like the previous week from whenever I run the report. So you can, in XI, create a report, set it as your favorite, and you can immediately go back there. It's kind of like a memorized report. Makes it easier to use. And one of our techs is just finishing up testing on scheduled reports that allows you to very easily say, okay, email this report to me or my manager or somebody else every Wednesday at 3 p.m. or every, the first of the month and the 15th of the month. It's really nice to get automated reports. All right, so that's enough of the slides. That was just in case all the VMs died, but I think they're okay. So I'll show you an example of some stuff. And if you have questions, I'll kind of treat this like a demo when we do WebEx demos. Just shout out or raise your hands or something, and maybe Mike can, hand you a microphone. We'll get your question on the mic. Just ask a question if I'm showing something, and I'd be happy to explain it. So with that, let me just get started really quick. So Nagios XI has session-based authentication, so you don't need to close your browser to switch to a different user, which is pretty nice. What's popping up here is some, the current alerts that should be, you should probably pay attention to. The homepage dashboard it's pretty customizable. It's a dashboard where you can add and delete dashlets. You can move them around, but by default, they just come with some dashlets that are kind of basic and get you started. But you can customize these, to your heart's content. These are per user. Performance graphs, these are built in. Again, we use PNP on the back end. And so these performance graphs are kind of bare because my laptop has been off for quite a bit of time. But we're just going to switch really quickly. We've also wrapped a lot of the things that you see in XI and made them be dashlets. So if you really like this performance graph, if this host, the performance graph for this host is really important to you, you can just hover over the dashify button or whatever you want to call it, and just add it to the dashboard of your choosing. If we go back to the homepage dashboard, which is where I added it, that graph is now here. And you don't need to do anything to refresh these pages. All the dashlets update via Ajax, so the performance graph will continue to scroll if you just leave this up on a knock monitor. A lot of people do this. They run Nagios XI kind of in the full screen mode. There's a little triangle here that'll go full screen. And they throw a couple of these dashboards up on big monitors to track the really important stuff they're interested in. Some of the stuff is very similar to Nagios Core. We try to keep it very similar because a lot of people they like the way Nagios Core looks. They're used to where things are on the interface. So the tactical overview is still there. The one thing that's a little different is each of these little blocks is a dashlet, so you can put this on a dashboard. But the other pages are very similar. We've added some paging capabilities in the status pages, so you can actually page. You don't end up with a billion things on one page. And again, made a lot of these different components of the screen into dashlets, so you can add them. Let's take a look at the configuration. We'll run through a wizard really quick. If anybody has questions, just raise your hand and. Yeah, I can do that. It's a really good one. Is that okay? Is that good enough, or do you want better? It's not. I mean, it's not going to be ideal, but we'll just do the best we can here. Let's try this. So this is an example of some of the wizards. When you install XI, it comes with a couple wizards. There are a bunch more that you can install. So let's just take a look at an example wizard. Take you through a website wizard. So if somebody wants to monitor a website, it's a really simple question to ask. They don't need to be super technical. They just know they want to monitor a website. Ask them for the URL. Gives them a few options. But basically, by default, it's going to say, I'm going to assume you want to monitor these things, like making sure we get a valid HTTP response, that we can ping the website, and that the DNS name you gave in the URL actually resolves to the same IP address that it did at the time that you ran this wizard. In all the wizards, the questions they ask and how they operate on the first two screens are different, and it depends on what wizard you're running. For instance, we've got a VMware wizard that you enter. If you want to monitor your VMware, your virtual machines, you can give it the IP address of your vSphere server, and it'll go out and query all the VMs that are running there. And on the second screen, it'll say, okay, here's a list of all of them. These are powered on. These are powered off. Which ones do you want to monitor? So what you see on each wizard is really dependent on what you're monitoring. But they all ask some really basic questions like, under normal circumstances, how often should this stuff be monitored? You don't have like a arcane variable like a check interval or retry interval. It puts it into like an actual sentence that somebody can understand. So when there's a problem, how many times should we try rechecking it? Or when a problem is detected, who should be notified? And you can just check a box and say, yep, send it to these people, or wait 15 minutes, or don't notify me about something. And then just a real easy way to add new things into host groups. And the parent host, if you're familiar with that, with Nagios Core and using that, specify that there as well. And then there's a giant apply button that does a lot of magic underneath the hood, and let's hope this actually works. But you see this little spinning wheel, and it does a lot of stuff under the hood. The wizards basically create a new service host definition that gets imported into Nagios Core Config Manager, which is a database, advanced database, config manager. and then it exports it from there to Nagios Core, checks the config. If the config passes, it'll restart Nagios Core. If the config is bad, like you get an error and Nagios Core would fail if you tried to restart it, it creates a snapshot of the config files and then rolls it back to the last known good snapshot. So you don't end up in a situation where somebody does something to your Nagios server and they kind of mess up the configuration and your Nagios server stops. And obviously there are probably ways where this can break, but this does help solve a lot of problems when you are configuring things. So I'll show you another wizard here. We'll just pick a different one. So I don't actually have a Windows server, but we'll put some fake data in there. So we have actually a couple wizards for monitoring Windows. There are a couple different ways to do it, and different clients want to monitor it in different ways, so we have a couple wizards. One, the default way is we assume that you're going to install an agent on the Windows server, and the agent that we support with this wizard is NSClient++. That's written by Michael Medin. We also have wizards that allow you to monitor Windows boxes with snmp and WMI. So if you are in an agentless environment, you don't need to install an agent. You can use those as well. Using an agent versus an agentless, I mean, there are different options that you can actually, different things you can monitor depending on what method you use, but some basic stuff you can usually get either way. Simple things on the Windows side, really friendly drop-downs, like what drives do you want to monitor? Okay, what services do you want to monitor? Just check the box. Performance counters. Boom, it's the same questions that it'll ask for any wizard, but it's really pretty easy to do. So this will start to populate once it actually gets checked. Any comments, questions on the wizards? Does a client require a reboot? No, it does not. It shouldn't.
Are you using the pre-caching with the objects when you add the new ones to it, or is it just dumping it in there and restarting?
No, it's just actually dumping it in and restarting. We could pre-cache the objects, but actually most times when Nagios is restarting, it has new objects to deal with, so it it would still probably help in really big environments. It would be interesting to see what this does in your environment. Your monitoring environment is really interesting. If you weren't able to be in his presentation, Daniel works for a big insurance company, and they're using Nagios in a manner that I think it's the largest install I've heard of. They're monitoring over like 1.4 million services. So I'm gonna read your slides after the conference and see what you did, and probably pick your brain a little bit.
As I say, that was one of the issues we ran into, was having to minimize that window, because when you get to so many hosts and so many services,
Yep.
you end up with such a long window of restart that being able to pre-cache it and then quick restart as fast as possible.
Yep. Yeah, and that's one of the things that you can do to tune the performance. And there are a couple other things. I mean, I'm sure you tweaked a lot of different parameters. We actually have a couple documents out on how to optimize performance on Nagios XI box. A lot of those things apply to a Nagios Core box too. Things like using a RAM disk for check results and different things. There are a lot of parameters that you can tune and tweak.
Just to add to that, does the Nagios XI, does that use NDO utils at all?
Yeah, it does.
Because I know one of the things that we've run into was during restarts, NDO utils kind of slows things down because it has to strip things out of the database and then put them back in again.
Yep.
Any ideas on that, on how to fix that, on how to minimize that?
it's kind of, oh, there you are. It's kind of bizarre. Like I didn't know who was asking the
I
question,
s-
so I'm kind of looking.
I
around.
hijacked the mic and
Yeah. You know, no, there are some performance issues with using NDO utils, especially when you monitor a lot of things, a really large environment, whether it's with Core or XI. We actually modified NDO utils slightly to strip out a lot of the data that wasn't necessary. NDO utils out of the box dumps everything to the database in case you want it. In most cases, you don't need all that stuff, so we tried to really trim it down. The one thing, and those are going to go into the next version of NDO utils. A community member, though, just posted recently, or I just found recently, a patch to make the updates that NDO utils, you know, all database writes, make them asynchronous so they don't block the monitoring engine. And I think that's going to help, you know, whether you're using Core or XI, it's the database holdup. So that should help.
Any idea when we might see that or where I can get that?
I can't offer promises, but soon. RSN real soon now, as soon as we can.
Okay.
So, but yeah, there are a lot of things underneath the hood that we have to deal with too. I mean, we have to deal with performance issues, for instance, with the graphing engine with PNP. PNP has its own issues. By default, we've enabled performance graphing because that's what people like to see. They like to see graphs. The problem is when you're monitoring 10,000 servers and you're monitoring 20 metrics on each, you got potentially 20,000 RD files. That's a lot of disk I/O. It's an entirely different issue. Then you got to look at how do you optimize disk I/O. It's not really a Nagios problem per se, but you can blame Nagios because it looks like Nagios is slow, but it's really, there are a lot of components underneath the hood that you need to take into consideration. And some of our customers have, you know, run into those issues and have come up with different solutions. Some people have actually offloaded NDO utils, the database, to another server. Some people offloaded the performance graph processing to another server, so they have a dedicated box that does the performance graph, you know, processes all the data, dumps it into RD files. There are a lot of things. It's hard to come up with a packaged solution that fits everybody, so we don't try. We just, if somebody wants to do something, we'll come up with a how-to on, like, here's how to do this if you want to do that, but we are not going to put that into, like, the vanilla packaged product. It's kind of what we have to live with.
Just coming back quickly to the Windows Server monitoring. Is there any sort of functionality built in for automated install of the NS client through the web interface, or is that something that would need to be handled completely separately?
It would need to be handled separately. I don't, you know, I won't say it couldn't be done through the web interface because you can do a lot of stuff that when you click a button on the web interface, a lot of stuff on the back end happens, the magic, and we could probably make that happen. But actually, one of our guys is going to be writing a document on how you use some of the Microsoft deployment tools where you know, say deploy NS client to these 100 machines in the domain. And that's, you know, if somebody has a better solution to deploy agents, I'd like to know, because a lot of it requires user interaction or domain credentials. So that's a problem with using agents. You got to do some work. But you can usually get more data and you have more power than like with an agentless solution. I mentioned briefly BPI in the keynote this morning. This is an example of the BPI add-on. BPI is actually an open source add-on. You can use it with Core, you can use it with XI. But it's an example I added, like an e-commerce system. So you can say, you know, here's the status of the e-commerce system. It's critical because, you know, we're really depending on Nagios.com, and it's timing out right now, which I should actually look into because that's our website. So, anyway. So, at least I'm not showing you a demo from Nagios.com right now. This is an example. You can group, you can create new business rules and, you know, dive down. And I'm not going to go into BPI. This is, you could have actually a separate talk on this. But it's a pretty popular. Mike Guthrie actually wrote it, the guy standing up in
Yeah,
the back.
I'm going to demo
So-
it tomorrow on
okay,
the
yeah.
visualization toolkit.
All right,
or
sounds cool. I
Visualization
won't
tools.
do it here then. But we've added some different ways to visualize data. We've created some different types of maps. They're not really maps like a Google map. We actually do have Google Map integration. It's not installed on this VM. But Google Maps is integrated. BB Map, this is a really, in my opinion, a really inefficient map. But it's not inefficient for everybody. And there was a good reason for doing this. And it's because we had some people switching over from Big Brother, and Big Brother has a layout that's kind of similar to this. And we talked with the potential client at that time that turned into a client, and we just said, okay, you need it to look like what? Okay, we can do that. Are you sure you want it to look like that? And they did. So we built it, and it can be actually useful. It doesn't scale well though, as you noticed. Mind map is a variation of this. It's just another way to, in a very condensed format, represent what's going on. So these little circles represent, hey, look, you got, some of the services are critical. Our latest alerts component is similar to that. This is actually a dashlet you could add to a dashboard, but it shows, hey, these are the latest things that happened on the network. These things are acknowledged. These things are critical. This add-on was actually the result of a customer that was coming from another product. I don't remember what it was, and he said we needed to look like this. If we can get this, we'll use XI. And so we wrote this to meet their needs, and other people have used it too. It is pretty useful. Hypermap. Let's first take a look at this. So if you use Nagios Core, you know what this map is. It doesn't scale at all. It's not really fun to use. You don't like to enter coordinates. That's not what that's not what you want to be doing. So that's still available. It's still Nagios Core is underneath the hood. But we built a new hypermap, which is based on some really nice jQuery libraries and a nice toolkit out there that somebody else put all the work into. We had to do a little bit of work to integrate the Nagios data into this map. And it's got some really cool features, so we can't take credit for how awesome this is. Somebody else wrote the toolkit to do this. But it does allow you to do things like zoom, pan, and essentially change the way the network looks. By clicking on a node, you can recenter it and have that be the center of the network. And this does get updated automatically with Ajax, so you don't need to refresh the page or anything. You can, if you click on a host, it'll show the host details over here. You can go and, that'll redirect you to that page. But, so, a little bit easier to understand host and service detail pages. So, in Nagios Core, it's kind of everything's on one page. It's not always appropriate for everyone. But we've integrated performance graphs into its own tab, so it's really easy to find those. Taking the advanced data that is maybe not appropriate for all end users and put it on an advanced tab. And when you create a user in Nagios XI, you can say, okay, is this an advanced user or not? And if somebody is set up and they're not an advanced user, they won't see that advanced tab. So that they won't see a bunch of information that they are likely to not understand anyway. Nagviz integrates just like it does with Nagios Core. I don't even think this is set up, so I'm not going to go into this. I'll show you the user admin stuff really quickly. So manage users. Let's go add a new user. No. So the nice thing about this, you can create a user account, and you can actually, Nagios XI will email the user their password, and you can have it, force them to change their password the next time they log in. And each user can have their own date and number preferences, so which is really useful if you have some of your users are in South America or Europe or different areas where the format is different. As far as security settings, if someone is either a user or an admin. Admins can do everything; they see everything. Normal end users can have additional permissions or limitations put on them. This option, being able to see everything, this is available in Nagios Core. Whether or not they can reconfigure everything is a little bit different. And whether they can control everything is even different still. Controlling something means you can schedule downtime, you can execute a command against it to alter maybe what happens, alter the check execution. But advanced features, so you can leave this unchecked, and if someone's a basic user, like a manager, like a help desk staff, they don't need to see the performance, some of the advanced performance data. They're not going to see that advanced stuff when they log into the UI. It doesn't make sense. And obviously, if you have somebody that you want to have see everything, but you don't want them to modify anything, you can say they've got read-only access. The nice thing about when you do this, if you fill in all the required information, is it automatically, if you select it, it emails that user with, here's your username, here's your password, here's the URL to log in. And it also creates, behind the scenes, this is a user level account when you log into Nagios XI, but behind the scenes, it creates a contact in Nagios Core by the same name. And that allows, that means that user is actually added. They're part of the monitoring and notification engine. So I'm going to go, each user, in the upper right-hand corner, they can click on their name, and they get to their own personal preferences page. They can change their own password. They don't need to come to you and say, hey, look, I forgot my password, or can you change it? They can change it on their own. They can choose to disable notifications if they want. They don't need to come to you. They don't need to come to you to change what types of notifications they get or when they get them, which is really nice. If you're the Nagios admin, you have better things to do than update other people's time periods. They can also choose how they want to receive notifications. So email or a mobile message. They'll just enter their phone number and easy. And so what happens when they do this is it looks really simple, and it's doing a lot of things underneath the hood. It's changing actually the Nagios core configuration, and it's spitting out a SQL error at the top. So like I said, it isn't a good demo unless something goes wrong. So let's hope that error is not permanent here. So each user, and this is very difficult to do in Nagios core. You can do it, and you can, because we actually had to make it work to work with XI, is we wanted to allow each user to customize what their notification messages looked like. And in order to do that in core, you have to set up separate notification commands for each user. You can't use a generic like notify by email command. You've got to do notify John Doe, of host problems, and then modify that command. But we essentially put the power back in the end user's hands, where they can modify and say, look, I want my host alerts to look like this or like that. They can just fill in some easy to understand variables. These messages can be pretty complex. You can actually embed PHP code in the messages, and it'll evaluate the PHP code to embed stuff that you might want, or integrate database stuff from other systems. So it's pretty nice. And they can modify what the messages look like for email or a mobile text, because they could be different. When you're getting a text message on your cell phone, you want it to be short. When you're getting an email message, you might want more detail. So I'm going to go over some of the visualization stuff that we did. Actually, I'll hit on the reports really quickly. So the availability reports, it's pulling from underneath the hood. It's running, the same availability reports that are available in Nagios Core. It's just putting them in a nicer to use or easier to understand format. And then you can get, PDF and CSV exports pretty easily. And I don't have this enabled, the feature where you can actually schedule a report. But let's say you really like the report of, you want to see this week's for CNN. So you want an availability report for CNN's website for this week, and you always want to see this kind of report. It's one of your favorites. It'll go into your saved reports. the next time that you actually go into the reports menu, it shows right here. You can edit your favorite reports, but if you click on your favorite report, it just runs it automatically. So it's kind of nice. It's just like memorizing a report. But those are reports. Nobody likes reports, right? Nobody wants reports. So let's take a look at some of the visualizations. See which server I'm going to use for this. Okay. So I mentioned, I had a screenshot of this in the slides. This is the heat map. It's basically a visual representation of alerts for hosts and services over time. And it allows you to very easily spot patterns. For example, it's easy to spot that there is obviously, make this a little bit bigger. There's obviously some kind of problem, a problem host that's causing a lot of issues. And if you hover over different areas, so it's always a CNN website that's causing a lot of problems. But it allows you to see, hey, look, these are the biggest troublemakers, or these are the specific periods in time, when a lot of things are happening. And if you're like, okay, what's going on here, you can click on that, and it'll redirect you to the very practical but very boring log report, or the state history report, which should come up here shortly. It's working. Okay. Obviously, it should have come up, but it didn't. The alert stream. The alert stream is a different, and we're going to see if this is, all right. The alert stream is another method that we set up, or another visualization tool that we created to kind of show you alerts over time in a different kind of way. So this is another way, kind of like the heat map, where you can say, okay, on an horizontal axis being time, what are the biggest problem makers on the network? And you can kind of hover over different areas, and if it works, you can drill down. And if it doesn't, it won't let you drill down. But trust me, it works. That's what somebody told me to say if it didn't work. I actually got Mike Weber, our lead trainer, and he's been given a couple sessions. He had a great couple words of advice. I exchanged emails with him a couple months ago. He said, I never trust that VMs or live demos are going to work, so I always prepare slides. So that's why I had a couple slides in case worst case scenario happened. It was really wise words of advice. But let me try this here. Okay, so this is the network replay report. There's not going to be a lot of data here. This is running on a VM that I just brought up less than a week ago and hasn't even been running probably 20 or 30% of the time. But what it allows you to do is kind of visualize your network. These are the hosts that are currently configured in Nagios, and it'll show you the status of those hosts over time. And so we probably need to skip ahead in time. So I'm going to pause this report. So you can see in this report right now that, some color changes occurred. This shows you that this machine just went down, this one just came online. They're all gray right now because back at this point in time, these devices were not configured yet in Nagios. They didn't have a status. They're just kind of ghosts at that time. But you can kind of watch what happens over time as the network changes. And that the nodes may not change color from green to red over time. Let's get some different granularity here. I'm going to manually do this. So you can kind of investigate over time the changes that occurred on your network. So a change just occurred there. You can see that, hey, look, a problem. Those connections to those machines, you know, machines on the other end went down or became unreachable. It's a nice visual way to just kind of see changes over time. And you won't see a lot of changes unless you've got a detailed time frame. But this replay allows you to basically select on a slider. Okay, show me the status of the network on September 25th at 10:02. You do that. You could see what the status was. It's historical information. It can be pretty useful. Does anybody have any questions so far? I'm just gonna.
Just curious that when you're going through and making the changes, adding hosts, deleting hosts, users, and all that kind of stuff, is there any like auditing or audit log that keeps track of that? So when somebody messes something up, you can go figure out who it was?
No, not yet. Not yet, but it's actually a really good idea, and other people have suggested that, and that's on our to-do list. Our to-do list is huge. People keep requesting new things, and they're really good ideas, and an audit log is one of them. You can, Nagios QL and the core config manager does have its own audit log, so you can see if somebody does it there. But if you use a configuration wizard or you create a new user through the admin interface, that isn't logged yet. Hold on just a second. Let's get you on audio, otherwise we won't have that.
If you really like your configuration manager and outputs standard Nagios core configs, can you import those on a regular basis? And
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. The way it's designed, and I'll just jump in the core config manager really quick. And there are 3 ways that you can manage configuration files in Nagios XI, and you don't need to use them exclusively. One is you can use the configuration wizards. You can also use the core config manager, which is the advanced config front end, and you can manually maintain some or all config files in a separate directory if you want. But yeah, you can import things on a regular basis. What happens underneath the hood when you run a monitoring wizard and you click apply, it's writing configuration information to a directory and it's being imported into the database and applied to Nagios. So it's pretty easy. There's one script you have to run. We actually have some people that do that because they integrate with a change management system.
On the user account area, do you have any support for external account databases like Active Directory or?
Yeah,
like
we do. We actually have two components that you can install, and I'll show you components. We'll see what's actually installed here. I haven't looked. So there's Active Directory integration component that was written by someone on our team. We also have an LDAP, a generic LDAP. So if you don't have Active Directory, you actually have just a plain LDAP, you can do that too. What you need to do in XI is you create a user account. It doesn't matter what password you give them in XI, they just have to have an account. When they authenticate, then it authenticates against the Active Directory or LDAP server. And if they're good to go, they have an XI account, it lets them in.
You're down to about 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay, sounds good. I mentioned that we designed Nagios XI to be really flexible and extendable. One of the 2 ways, 3 ways actually, but the main ones are components and configuration wizards. We've made it so that it's really easy to modify the way XI works or what it can do, like the back-end authentication or displaying something new on the screen, by allowing people to develop components. And these are just some of the components that are installed on this machine. Some components might provide additional notification methods, like we have a component that provides notifications via RSS. And some components provide functionality like Active Directory backend authentication or maybe scheduled reporting. It's really easy if we release a component or somebody else writes a component, it's really easy. You upload it right through the web interface, it installs it, and you might need to do some configuration stuff depending on what the component is. Like the Active Directory, you got to fill in some information that's used for backend config. The wizards, though, they're built the same way. They're made to be easy to install as well as easy to use. So these are a bunch that we've actually installed. on this machine. I mentioned we've got Windows SNMP and WMI wizards as well. These are installed here. So, does anybody have any last questions, or just a couple minutes left?
Nagios XI, is it synchronized with the Nagios Core upgrade or the maintenance?
You mean is the same version of Core used?
Yeah.
The newest release of Nagios Core is not yet in Nagios XI. We wanted to see how things worked with the Core stuff that was out there. There were some changes that were made, and so we probably will always be 1 or 2 versions behind underneath the hood of XI, because we want to make sure that Core doesn't break, or some new great feature that's supposed to improve performance doesn't take down our commercial product. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Got time for about one more question.
Anybody else? One more up here.
Have you had any customers make any web parts for SharePoint out of your main KPI on your home screen? Have you had any thought into integrating that into SharePoint?
Integrating the data, we do actually. We had, I don't know if they put it into SharePoint, but we had like a number of universities. They said, look, we want to provide some of the information that's being monitored in Nagios on like the campus like portal. And what we have, and I'll see if it's embedded here. So we have a backend API in Nagios XI. There's a component that makes it easy to understand like how to get there, or how to get certain information. And Mike actually wrote a guide on how to get data, and you actually have to authenticate to the back end, because how you authenticate or who you authenticate as determines what data you get. So as a quick example here. So it's got a real simple API. I'm already logged in, so it's not asking me for credentials. I'm just saying, hey, give me the current status of all hosts, and it's dumping all that information back in XML, which makes it super easy if you want to integrate it with any kind of front-end portal or anything. So we tried to make that pretty flexible. All right, well, thank you very much. I have to apologize. I'm glad I've got some screenshots, and if you have any questions, we do have an online demo that should work, hopefully better than some of the things I tried to show here, but you never know. But feel free to ask questions about XI later if you want. So.
And can you give people a rundown for the evening event?
Oh,
the schedule?
yeah, good idea. Okay, so the evening event, we're going to stop. The conference is going to end for the day now. The evening event, make sure that you're outside. There's a side door between where track 3 is and where the restaurant is. Outside that side door, there are going to be 2 buses waiting. The last bus will leave at 6:15, so be out there and catch the bus. If you don't catch it, if you miss it, the address of the evening event, again, is on the back of your badge, and there are phone numbers for taxis. So we'd like to see you there. It's going to be a lot of fun. So. The return bus schedule, I think what we're going to do, I believe that, we'll get there probably about 6:30, and I believe that the buses start coming back at 9:15. Is that right, Mary? Yeah, so they start coming back at 9:15. I think they'll come back at then 10:15, 11:15, so kind of on the hour. And then I think there'll be one at 11:45, and I think the last bus leaves at like midnight. So if you want to come back, sooner, if you need to come back, it's probably best to catch a taxi, but you've got buses going back on the hour at least. All right, thanks. Enjoy the evening event.